What's up, guys? Shawnthebro here, and today I should have rebuilt my reflection captures. I just realized that. So anyway, today we are going to be going over how to add animations to your characters. So now our mutants, you'll see, actually walk backward, walk forward, and then we will have them jump. They can stop at a certain frame until they hit the ground, and then they will go back to their idle, and they can crouch. So we are 21 episodes into the fighting game series. It's a long time before we got animations in, other than like the idle and things like that, idle and the attacks. So if you're just here for animations on your characters for jumping and crouching and all that, great. I will link an iCard in the top right to the first episode of the fighting game tutorial series if you want to catch up. If you don't, if you're cool with just the animations, then good to go. No worries. But wanted to throw it out there. I'll try and explain things in the easiest way possible without having any knowledge of the project itself for that reasoning. However, we are using the side-scroller template, and we're going to be working in the template character classes. You can do this in Blueprint. You don't need C++. However, I decided to do it in C++ because I like coding. And it does give you a little bit more control, in my opinion, than Blueprint does. Anyway, basically, if you want to have the animations we're going to have, we're going to add a state for jumping. Because we need to track when our player is jumping or otherwise off the ground. There are times when, like, if you get launched, you want to go to a different animation. So we're not going to cover that today, but that is on the list in the Discord of things that I have to cover. So we'll get to it, for sure. For now, we're just going to focus on jumping and adding animations with that. So, in E-directional input, which this should probably be called like E-player state or something. So I'll most likely change this for next episode, but I couldn't exactly decide what I wanted to call it, so I left it alone for now. And that way, people who are familiar with the series will know what this enum is. Essentially, this enum was used to determine directional attacks if we were moving left or right. We're going to add VE jumping, and basically, it's literally just the state for when the player jumps. That's all. So add that to your enum, or otherwise have a way of tracking when the player is jumping. You'll see I've added a few new functions, 3 functions for jump and 2 for crouch. So all 3 functions for jump are going to be overridden functions that already exist in Unreal. So I did not write these jump functions. The reason for that, I think Unreal does a very good job of letting you control your jumps, changing things about them, so their height, the jump count, even your apex of your jump can be changed so that you can either jump again after that, or once you hit that, you can no longer jump. It's pretty in-depth. It's surprisingly in-depth. So we're going to override 3 jump functions that help us determine if our character is in the air currently or if he landed back on the ground. Alrighty. And you'll see my comment here. Does this override the A character and A pawn functionality to have more control over jumps and landings? So go to your character, do virtual void jump override, virtual void stop jumping override, virtual void landed, constant F hit result, hit override. This is a reference, by the way. This stuff isn't really important, to be honest. Just know that you have to use these exact names. Since this override function, or this override keyword, what it does is it means we are going to be using functionality from a specific class, a parent class somewhere up the line. Like this fighter template class, or this fighter template character, is a child of a pawn class, which is, I can't exactly remember if he's a child of the character or if he is a friend class of character or what the actual relationship is here. But just know that the fighter template character is in some way a child of the A character class. And you know this because in the jump, this used to be a character jump, a character stop jumping. Well, we're overriding that today, today, so that we can perform our own functionality and jump, stop jumping, and landed. Okay, so that's what that does. Now, we are going to make 2 functions for ourselves as well. Unreal does have crouching functionality and crouching variables that you can change. For me, the crouching that they have is fine, but not the way I think of it in a fighting game. So I've actually just made new functions as opposed to overriding them. You could technically override their crouch functions. Feel free, play around with it. But if you're going to follow this tutorial exactly, all we need for today, 3 new functions overridden, and 2 new functions that we're making from scratch. All right. If you go into your CPP file, we're going to need to change these and add new ones as well. So, for those that did not watch the series on multiple controllers or multiple players, this might be a bit confusing, but the setup player input component is not a function I wrote. It is one that will be in your character by default. So go ahead and go to this function, and these are where you can bind actions to controls. Now, jump P1 already exists. Well, jump in some capacity will already exist, but it will be calling a character jump. We don't want this. We want our overridden functionality. So, just to be on the safe side, make sure that you have controls for both your jump and crouch already. Edit project settings, input. Longtime fans of the series are getting bored of me showing this by now, but so go to your action mappings, press plus to add a new one. Make sure you have jump P1, jump P2 if you're having multiplayer, crouch P1, P2 if you're having multiplayer again. And then just set a control to it. I did S for player 1 and down as the arrow key for player 2. Once we have these, make sure you use these same exact names in here, in these quotes. And you can see I do have the player 2 stuff down here. And lastly, we want to change a character to our character's name, the class that we're overriding it from. So a fighter template character jump, a fighter template character stop jumping. Now what we need to do is actually fill out these functions that we've just overridden, excuse me, I keep saying overwritten, that is incorrect. It should be overridden, like override. So what we're going to do, just make your function, void, class name, jump. We're going to still call a character jump, but we're going to add new functionality. We're going to set the directional input, that is our enum instance. It should be right here. Okay. It is blueprint editable, all that, but more importantly, it is the enum instance of this enum class. Okay. So, we're going to set our directional input to be jumping. Simple as that. Now, I did override stop jumping, and we call a character stop jumping. We don't explicitly add any functionality here in this case. You definitely could. There's a ton of cases here in fighting games where you could. Could determine how you do certain attacks, air combos, things like that. I'm not going to be doing any of that yet, at least, so I just left it alone, but it's good to have as a function we can edit in the future. Now, understand, stop jumping isn't when you hit the ground. Stop jumping occurs, and you can tell right from this function right here, it occurs when the jump P1 button was released. Okay? So don't confuse this with landed. This is why we are also overriding landed. Alright. So we've overridden landed as well right here. I didn't use the A character landed or whatever class it happens to stem from because it wasn't, I looked at the functionality, it didn't seem to be anything that was necessary to our game. So you might want to do it, and we can test it right now. Some live testing. It is a character landed. You can do this. It's probably not a bad idea. I didn't have anything wrong with it that I was like, yeah, we don't want to do that. But I just wasn't really, it didn't need to be there, in my opinion. So you can remove it or keep it there. It doesn't matter. I'll keep it commented out for reference sake in case we need to use it down the line, or in case I was like, hey, I was wrong, we do need this. I'm going to build so I can make sure I compile that. But what we want to do is once we've landed, once we've hit the ground again or hit some sort of object that we can stand on, we want to set our directional input back to default. Default in our enum is not moving. So this means it's not necessarily the best state. Like you could have a landed state or something like that, but not moving is sufficient because if you're pressing left or right, you're instantly going to go, like on tick, you will go to moving right or moving left. So there's really nothing wrong with putting you back to the default state. It's not going to actually stop you from moving or anything like that. You might have literally a frame delay of your animation playing, worst case scenario. depending on how you set up the states to control your animations, but still really not a huge deal. Lastly, and we set up the crouch P1, crouch P2, just on pressed, on release, call start crouching, stop crouching. These are completely our functions, remember. Literally, add a boolean called isCrouching. Right here. I made it blueprint, edit anywhere, all that good stuff. And when we are crouching, when we call start crouching, isCrouching is true. When we stop crouching, isCrouching is false. It's that simple. We're going to use this isCrouching boolean in the anim BP to determine what animation our character should be in. Not bad. Now, a few extra notes here, and this can change depending on your game. So you might not want to do this. So for move right is in Unreal. It determines if you move left or right, depending on this value. I did not want to be able to move while we were crouched. Some games you can. Some fighting games you can. Some other games you can. But in this case, I did not want to be able to move while we were crouched. So what I did was in move right, we already had can move, which is essentially if you're past your intro animation and not on a dying animation or something like that. And we are not currently crouching. We can move. Okay. I did one other thing in here as well. So if we're moving right or left, I didn't want to apply these movements because these will play the animations in the air. What we'll actually have is a right jump and a left jump, right? So you'll have a jump straight up in the air, and then you'll have directional jumps as well. We don't have directional jumps yet, although it would be extremely easy to put in, believe it or not. You just check for two states. You would essentially check if one of these is accurate, and you go to jump afterward. But we don't have those yet, so I just also checked made sure we were not jumping before setting the moving right, moving left, or default states. Alright guys, and that's it for the code section. So now all we have to do is set up the actual AnimBP. So if you go back to the editor, and we're going to go into our mutant AnimBP, and also, real quick, I should have mentioned this. In the mutant character BP, or whatever character it is that you're using, you'll want to make sure that your new inputs are working. So you won't need your new jump because jump P2 is already there. We just overridden overridden is what I was about to say. Overrided the functionality. Overrode the functionality. That's it. That we were using previously. So don't worry about changing this. And you'll want to add your crouch P2 functionality in here to start crouching and stop crouching. So it's the same as all the other commands we added in here. If you're doing this on one single device on a keyboard, this is how we handle it. So you use your player 2 reference, make sure it's valid, and either call start crouching or stop crouching based on if it was pressed or released. That's simple. And to find this, you can literally type in the name of your input action mapping. So crouch P2 right here. Okay, so you should do that. You don't technically have to, especially if you don't plan on using one device, but there you go, just for consistency's sake. Now, this has gotten a bit uglier since the last time we saw it because we got a lot going on now here. So I'm going to explain everything as well as I can. I know anim state machines I'm not the best with, okay? So I know that this is not as clean as it could be, but I tried to keep it pretty clean for you guys. Understand, if you've been following this series, I have not changed anything with the way anything that already existed works, except I removed walking attacks, like directional attacks, from the idle animation. Because the back quick attack or whatever, back light attack and forward light attack, I don't want to be able to do those from idle because I don't want to cancel my movement state. I want to make sure I'm walking backward or walking forward first, and then I can go directly to those attacks. This will actually make our lives easier in the long run, but we do have to do some changes. So you can see what I mean here. Okay. So, what we're doing is we're going to add new states. We're going to add a walking backward a walking forward, crouch, and I have start jump, end jump. This could be one. I did this because you could have one for your rising jump animation and one for your ending jump, like your falling jump animation. So when he initially jumps and then when he's falling to the ground, those could be two separate animations. So that's what this is for. For now, I literally just automatically transition to it once start jump is done, and then it gets stuck on this frame, and when it's done, or when we've landed, then we return back to the default state of idle. So don't get confused about this. This is just if you want to have two different animations for jumping and falling. Okay? We can actually talk about that more later as well, but for now it's fine. So let's get started with the jump and the crouch, since the walking backward, walking forward are actually the most complicated. So start jump, literally our idle to start jump animation rule is we just check for directional input is set to jumping. So we grab our character reference that we set in the event graph in the begin play. We get the directional input, which is that enum instance, and we just check if it's equal to jumping, and then put it into the result. If it's true, we'll go to jump. Just for consistency's sake, end jump, start jump to end jump, so rising to falling, just when rising is done, it will automatically go to falling right now. What you should do if you want to have rising and falling or have some sort of either ANIMBPs, or excuse me, not ANIMBPs, anim notifies, or if you want to have some sort of trigger for when you start falling to the ground, gravity starts pulling you back down, then, you know, perform this here. Either way, you can have some logic here. Right now, you can make it automatic if you want to keep it open to add functionality in later. Then end jump back to idle, and or start jump back to idle, or just jump back to idle if you're not doing start jump, end jump. The rule for that is basically get your character reference, get your enum instance, and check if it's not, if the state is not moving. Not moving is your idle, it's your default. VE default is what it's called in code. And then just return it. That's that simple. That'll actually work for the jump. Make sure you do have jump and crouch animations that you actually add, so double click. Go add your jump, like for me, this is jump. I just split it, that way he could get stuck in the air, and actually that's a good note. So I did have him get stuck in the air, and I'll show you again just in case you forgot. But he gets stuck in the air, like he freezes on the last frame of his animation, because I was thinking of like Killer Instinct, I know it does that a lot. But anyway, the reason I chose to do that is because I didn't want him to play through his whole animation and then look like he was going to hit the ground. Like, you know, really brace for impact. Or some of these animations, like I got these animations on Mixamo. If you want to get free models and animations, I'll link you to a quick video on how to do that I made. But yeah, some of them actually have them landing and everything. So I split it. That way we can just stop it at a frame and it looks pretty good. But make sure you add it. Make sure you don't loop it. And you can choose the play rate to be whatever you want. Alright. Now, idle to crouch. Let's do. Idle to crouch is very simple. Basically, have a state where you have a crouching animation. That's mine. Click on it. Make sure it's not looping. But I increase my play rate by a lot. First of all, crouching should be very quick, especially in a fighting game. And that animation is insanely slow. So I kept it at a play rate of 50. That way it was very quick. The animation rules are as simple as you can think of. Literally grab your character reference. Is crouching that boolean we set using the two functions? Start crouching and stop crouching. And basically return that result. So if is crouching is true, we're going to go into crouch. And then literally to go from crouch to idle, you grab your character reference, check if you're crouching. If you're not crouching, then you want to return back to idle. That simple. Alright guys, to wrap it up, we are going to go over walking forward and walking backward. Now, the good thing is they're basically the exact same thing, so we just have to go over one. It's not that they're much harder, but we do have to kind of change around the way we did some of the other logic. So I said earlier that I removed this functionality. I technically did not. However, you should never really take this functionality. before it takes walking forward or walking backward. So we could remove these animations like idle to this attack and idle to this attack and be fine. It won't really affect anything. I'll leave them for now as to not make the video more confusing. But all you really need to know is make a new state, walking forward, walking backward. Add your animation as you normally would. This is mine. He's just doing a cool little bro walk. Got nothing wrong with him today. I set it. Make sure you set your walking to loop. You want your walking to loop because you don't want it to get stuck on the last frame of your walk and then you're just moving left and right. Play rate to whatever you want. I set it to 3. And just to note, make a walking backward. Set the play rate to be the same if you want, but if you're using the same animation as you're walking forward as I am, you can use this as your walking backward animation. Just set your play rate to be negative. So I made mine -3 because my walking forward was 3. So now it plays in reverse at the same speed as walking forward does. Okay, so those are your states. For walking forward, the transition rule essentially is that the character reference, enum instance, is moving left, and the character is flipped. Because in this case, walking forward means walking toward your opponent. Walking backward means walking away from your opponent. So we need to determine the direction they're facing as well as the way they're moving. So again, moving left, so imagine you're player 2, you're on the right side of the screen by default. You're moving left, you're moving toward your opponent, and is flipped is a balloon we added for the episode where it's the characters always face the enemy. In the default game mode BP, you can see, and I showed this in the tutorial, but just a refresher, you can see we set player 2 to be flipped by default. Flip basically means we were going to flip their mesh. That way they were on an X scale of -1. That way they were facing each other. Because of this, the characters on the right are flipped because by default they're facing right. So if they're on the right, they're facing left, which means they're flipped from where they normally are, from the orientation they're normally at. Because of this, if you're flipped and you're moving left, then you are walking forward. Otherwise, if you're moving right and you're not flipped, then you're on the left, you're moving toward your opponent, then you're also walking forward. And same with backward, but the opposite. So to be walking backward, you have to be facing right, or moving right, but you have to be flipped. So you're player 2, okay, you're moving to the right, which is away from the enemy, because you are flipped. Otherwise, you're not flipped, so you're player 1, you're on the left side, and you're moving left. You're going backward, away from your opponent. So you're moving backward. Alright, guys, and then lastly, all you need to do are set up your returns. So walking forward to idle, you literally just check and make sure the character's enum instance is not moving. Same with walking backward, not moving. And you're good there. Now, we can also add attacks and jumps and all of that. Again, we didn't get too far into it, didn't do directional jumps or anything like that. But I do have the walking attack set up. And what I mean is we can be walking and we can break out of these animations to still do an attack. I have to figure out my controls because I switched them. What is it? G, of course. There you go, so G. So, what are my other attacks? E. We can do these, and player 2 can also do them, whatever his attacks are. There we go. But anyway, these were originally coming from idle before and just based off your direction. However, since we will be in another state in the state machine, we need to make sure we can do it from the button, or from the state we're in. Just to note, this will work up against the walls if you've been following the camera and stage boundary tutorials. Don't worry about that. You can still do these attacks up against walls since you will be in that animation state. So, all you need to do is go from your walking forward to your forward attack and just check the same things that you would do normally. So to enter walking forward, and I entered the wrong one there. So all you need to do is go from walking forward to your walking forward attack. Is you just need to check if that attack was pressed, if that button was pressed and that attack was used. Because we already know if we're in the walking forward state that we're walking forward. So that allows us to eliminate all this other junk that we normally do, where we check if the attack was pressed and we check if we're moving right. Well, now we already know we were moving right to get to the state, so we know that if we just check if the attack was used, we'll use it. Same with walking backward. We just need to check if the attack was used, and we are good to go. Make sure as well, since we are not using the anim booleans anymore, we do have to make sure we use the start transition event, custom blueprint event, start attack transition, which if you remember is in the anim BP. I won't go over all of this again, as to not waste your time. But just remember that we did have to set up these custom blueprint events if you're not using the anim BP variables. And you see that I removed the anim variables from the list. So make sure in both walking backward and walking forward you have start attack transition. And then I still have them return right back to idle right away. So just make sure they have your end attack transition. And there you go, guys. That's how you can make fun little animations in your game. You can have crouching, jumping, and walking back and forth. So if you have any issues with this episode or need any help, feel free to reach out to me on YouTube in the comments. I will answer. However, you're more than welcome to join our Discord. I can't link in the iCard because of YouTube reasons, but it's in the description. If you want to join it, we'll be able to help you a lot more with pictures and videos and things like that. So it'll help you catch up to the series, and we can solve any issues that you come across along the way. Lastly, guys, if you want to see us do something other than program, we are over on Shawnthebro27 on Twitch. Someone took my Shawnthebro name, so we're Shawnthebro27. And we play Souls Wednesday, which is Dark Souls, or Dark Souls-like games like Bloodborne and Demon Souls, and Resident Evil Friday, which allows us to play through the entire Resident Evil series. Then, usually Tuesday, Saturday, or Sunday, we'll play a multiplayer game with some friends. So, it's a fun time. Feel free to come support us and check us out. But other than that, guys, I'm Shawnthebro. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I'll see you in the next one where we probably do something terrible like air combos or, well, air launchers, most likely. We'll see. It's going to be a struggle, guys, but we'll see. All right, guys, I'm Shawnthebro. Goodbye.